Hey guys, tonight we journey to the edge of the known world. You're standing at the lip of a windswept cliff in medieval Iceland, staring out over an endless gray sea that smells like salt and myth. The wind tickles your ears like a nosy uncle. The sky is a foggy watercolor of blues and whites, and a chorus of seabirds echoes in the air, most of them puffins. Those stubby, round, and somehow smug little creatures waddling with purpose across the rocks. You pull your cloak tighter, although, honestly, it's not doing much. The wool is thick but perpetually damp. You've come seeking peace, perhaps some clarity, or maybe just a place to sleep without someone shouting about taxes. Either way, you've arrived at a monastery so quiet, the only schedule is kept by the creatures outside your window. This isn't your average medieval order either. No fierce vows of silence, no fiery sermons or forbidding architecture. These monks are gentle, slightly peculiar, and spend an unusual amount of time watching. Puffins. Yes, puffins. You've probably never relied on a seabird to decide when to eat your next meal. But, well, you're not in 2025 anymore, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to post your location and the time you're tuning in. I love seeing where and when you all listen from. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle along a worn path of stone and turf, led by a robed figure named Brother Orn. He has eyebrows like chimney brushes and a voice like warm oatmeal. "We watch the birds," he says matter-of-factly, pointing to a rocky outcrop dotted with puffins. "They tell us things." You're not sure if that's charming or deeply ominous. The monastery isn't much to look at, just a huddle of turf-roofed cells built into the hillside like half-asleep hobbit homes. Inside, it smells like fish oil, smoke, and the gentle tang of wet parchment. The walls sweat a little, but there's a strange coziness to the place. The stone is ancient, the moss older. A small candle flickers by the doorway, guarded by a wooden carving of what looks suspiciously like a puffin in a halo. You try not to laugh. You're shown to your cell bare, round and just large enough for one adult, a straw mattress, and a puffin-sized window. Outside, the Atlantic crashes rhythmically against black volcanic rock. It's like nature's white noise machine, minus the Bluetooth. You sit on the bed, wrap yourself in a scratchy blanket, and glance out at a puffin standing motionless on the ledge. The monk had called him Brother Gudmund. Whether that's a joke or a sign of serious avian respect is unclear. Dinner is a thin stew made with root vegetables, seaweed, and something politely referred to as ocean flavor. You slurp it slowly while the monks murmur psalms. Their chanting isn't forceful or melodic. It's more like a low-tide humming in unison. Historians still argue whether these remote Icelandic monastic communities were officially Benedictine or if they followed a more hybridized local rule. What's clear, though, is that they had a deep connection to the cycles of nature, especially when official clocks and bells were frozen, cracked, or just never arrived by boat. The puffins, it seems, had perfect timing. Brother Orm returns, holding a feather like a scepter. "You'll take the morning watch," he says. Brother Gudmund wakes at dawn precisely. He'll let you know when to ring the bell. You open your mouth to protest, but he's already gone, probably to tuck in a turned dot, so there you are, leaning on the windowsill of your cell as the sky shifts from charcoal to pewter. Gudmund the puffin is still there, motionless. Then, with all the drama of a biscuit falling off a plate, he ruffles his feathers and waddles forward, head cocked. The other monks begin to stir. It's not magic, really. Puffins are creatures of habit. Every morning, around the same sliver of sun, they launch from their cliffs to fish. The monks, lacking working sundials in the often overcast Icelandic skies, learned to track this behavior instead. You clamber out of your cell, ring a small bell made from what looks like a hollowed cod skull, and the others nod as if you've passed your first test. Breakfast is more stew and a tiny slab of dried fish that requires more chewing than thinking. Mainstream fact to chew on while you do: medieval Iceland's monastic records, though sparse, note several communities maintaining their own timekeeping through animal behaviors. Monks would track sheep migrations, whale beachings, and in this case, seabird habits. Back in your room, Brother Gudmund is gone. You feel a strange disappointment, like your alarm clock just ghosted you. The day ahead is quiet, but never idle. You help sort fish bones for ink, sweep out the scriptorium, and just once try to ask why there's a puffin painted on the Psalter's title page. The monk answering you just shrugs, because it's true. Not wrong, not weird, just true. You begin to see the pattern. The puffins fly when they're supposed to. They arrive in pairs, they guard their burrows with the patience of saints, and they return each season like clockwork. Which, for these monks, is exactly what they are: a living, feathered, vaguely offended clock. And as the wind hums lullabies across the basalt cliffs, and your fingers stain with ink and fish scales, you feel yourself slipping into a rhythm too. A rhythm not built on minutes or seconds, but wing beats and waddles. Tides and tilts of beak. You won't last a week out here, probably. Your boots are too modern. Your expectations too fast. But for now, here in this damp cell with the sea roaring below and the soft shuffle of feathers outside, you finally feel something strange. You feel on time. You wake to the soft, erratic thunk of rain hitting turf and the faint smell of damp wool. The puffins are still asleep or pretending to be. You can't quite tell. Their eyes, small and dark, always look like they're keeping secrets. Brother Orn hands you a sliver of smoked fish and gestures for you to follow. The morning is unusually quiet. Even the gulls have decided to sleep in. You wrap your cloak tighter and step onto the stone path that loops along the cliff face, down a narrow track almost hidden by lichen and wind-shaped grass sits the true heart of the monastery, the oratory. It's small, round, and appears to have been built by stacking wet stones and daring gravity to disagree. Inside, it's cold but dry and filled with the sound of 7 monks chanting in slow, melodic syllables. Their voices rise and fall like waves, soothing, constant, and not entirely in tune. Vespers? You whisper to Brother Orn. Lauds, he replies, but close enough. The rhythm of prayer isn't guided by bells here, or sand timers, or candle notches. It's led by the monks' trained awareness of natural cycles, primarily, and yes, unbelievably, the daily schedule of puffins. These birds leave their burrows at the same hour every morning and return around dusk, their flight pattern eerily precise. The monks believe nature is not only reliable, it's divine. You sit on a damp bench carved into the stone wall, and let the chants wash over you. The flickering candlelight makes the space feel like it's breathing. Shadows move like tides. Somewhere behind you, water drips in rhythm, like a slow metronome designed by a sleepy glacier. Mainstream fact for you to chew on like salted shark. Icelandic monasteries in the early medieval period were often self-sufficient, isolated, and heavily reliant on natural rhythms. Many didn't have access to formal church bells for timekeeping, especially not on remote islands or cliff-bound. Communities like this one. As the prayers fade into a gentle hum, Brother Orn points to a puffin sitting on the oratory windowsill. That's Sister Haldora. She's never early. The monks smile. They seem genuinely fond of the puffins, not just as timekeepers, but as neighbors, personalities, maybe even colleagues in this strange business of devotion. You step outside, where the cliffs roll endlessly into fog. A light drizzle begins to fall, cold but bearable. Your boots squelch against the wet turf. From here, you can see dozens of puffin burrows, tiny cave mouths leading into the cliff sides like a whimsical apartment complex. Your task this morning is mundane but oddly comforting. You're to help collect driftwood, used for both fuel and scribal work. The wind howls and your hood flaps against your ears like a startled bat, but you press on. You find a knotted piece shaped vaguely like a penguin and almost keep it, before remembering that humor is tolerated, but only in moderation. As you return, you see Brother Sturmare carving lines into a flat rock. Puffin scratched at the burrow. "Door with her left foot," he says, not looking up. "That means the tide's turning early." You blink. "Is that accurate?" He shrugs. "Historians still argue whether we were right. The monks don't care if modern science validates their system. They're not here for precision. They're here for rhythm, for peace, and for fish, preferably smoked. Lunch is served outdoors today. A bowl of kelp soup, bread so dense it might qualify as building material, and something gray. You don't ask. The monks eat in silence, watching the puffins dive and wheel and tumble like flying loaves of bread. Every few minutes, one will land near a monk and stare, waiting. Some monks respond with crumbs, others with prayers. A few simply nod, like old friends passing each other on a park bench. You're starting to understand something. Important, something soft. These birds are not symbols. They're not mascots. They're cohabitants. Maybe even co-worshippers. The monks have woven puffins into their world so completely that time itself bends around them. That afternoon, you join a feather-counting circle. Yes, that's a thing. The monks sit in a ring, gently gathering fallen puffin feathers and placing them into shallow bowls. Each monk takes turns describing the day's events through metaphor. "The wind argued with the sea this morning," one says. But the puffins refuse to pick sides. Brother Orn passes you a bowl and says, "Your turn." You panic slightly, then mutter, "One puffin winked at me today. I think I've been blessed, or warned." The monks nod solemnly. Apparently, that was acceptable. Quirky tidbit alert. It was not uncommon for remote religious orders to anthropomorphize animals in ways that bordered on theological. Icelandic hagiographies occasionally refer to sea angels, which may have been, yes, puffins or other seabirds observed during moments of deep meditation. Later, you help fix a loose stone in one of the dormitory walls. It's cold, gritty. Work, and the mortar smells suspiciously like fermented milk. But as you scrape and press and mutter mildly unholy words under your breath, a line of puffins gather to watch. One tilts its head dramatically. It's hard not to feel judged. Evening winds return with a vengeance, so you duck into the scriptorium where parchment hangs like drying laundry. One monk is illuminating a page with a golden halo around a puffin. You raise an eyebrow. He doesn't look up. Saint Petronilla of the Sea, patron of flippers. You're not sure whether he's joking. He probably isn't. You finish the day. In your cell, where the candle burns low and the sea whispers lullabies through the stone walls. Gudmund the puffin returns, standing quietly outside your window. You nod to him like an old roommate who never quite moved out. You may not have a watch, or a phone, or a calendar that makes sense out here, but you do have puffins. You have wind and moss, and the slow, soft ticking of bird wings in flight. And, in this strange place at the edge of the world that feels like enough. You're up before the sky even decides on a color somewhere between smoky lavender and unwashed wool. A low fog clings to the turf like a tired cat, and your breath paints lazy clouds in the morning air. You step outside, clutching a half-warm bowl of barley mash and pickled kelp, which, for the record, tastes better than it smells. Slightly. Brother Gudman the Puffin is already posted at your windowsill, just as the monk said he would be. He tilts his head with all the weight of ancient wisdom, or maybe he's just wondering why your cloak is inside out. Either way, his appearance signals something important. It's breakfast time. You follow the monks along the path that rings. The cliffside, a slow procession of brown wool robes and shuffling sandals. There's no bell to mark the hour, no tolling announcement of divine presence. Just puffins launching from their burrows in short bursts like sleepy cannonballs. The puffins dictate everything here. You start to notice it in the smallest ways, how meals begin when the first puffin returns with fish in its beak. How the monks switch from gardening to prayer when the birds start cleaning their feathers. The rhythm is subtle, but it governs every movement. Historians still argue whether this was intentional timekeeping or an accidental system that simply made sense when other methods failed. After all, the sun in Iceland doesn't always rise. When you expect it, in winter, it barely shows up to work. In summer, it overstays like a guest who refuses to leave. But puffins? Puffins are punctual. You help Brother Orn in the herb garden, such as it is. Most of it is moss and stubborn weeds. But there are also patches of angelica and arctic thyme. We harvest when the puffins start pecking at the fescue. He says, you nod, pretending you know what fescue is. Also when the abbot sneezes twice in a row, he adds. But that's more superstition. Time flows differently here. Not in neat blocks, but in overlapping loops. Puffin time is circular. You begin to understand how the monks manage their hours not by counting, but by watching. A mainstream fact to ground all this puffin-fueled pondering, in pre-industrial Europe, time was often measured through natural cues: roosters crowing, shadows cast, or meal bells rung by the sun's position. But in Iceland's harsh climate, with long periods of low light and severe weather, these methods often fell short. That's where the birds came in. Later in the day, you observe Brother Rurik seated cross-legged with a small slate, sketching puffin postures. "This one's preen twice waddle," he murmurs, "means we're close to sext." You blink. Like, noon? He nods sagely, as though this has always been obvious. The monks refer to the canonical hours, matins, lauds, prime, and so on, but instead of relying on fixed times, they've mapped bird behavior to each one. A tilt of the head at lauds, a synchronized takeoff at terce, a communal fluffing ritual for vespers. It's completely bonkers. And yet, oddly effective. There's a structure to this chaos, a calmness to the absurdity. You watch a monk wait patiently for a puffin to hop 3 times before he starts reading aloud. Another won't light his candle until one bird lands on a specific boulder. These aren't rituals in the traditional sense. They're more like silent agreements between species. Quirky tidbit for the sleepy-minded. Monks in various parts of Europe kept bees, falcons, and even squirrels as unofficial companions. Icelandic sources occasionally reference sea brethren in monastery marginalia, which some historians believe refer to puffins, not monks from overseas. As once assumed, in the late afternoon, you follow Brother Horn to the lookout post, a flat patch of cliff with the best puffin visibility in the region. It's like a luxury suite for birdwatching. You sit with a pair of polished horn lenses tied together with sinew, a crude but functional set of binoculars, and scan the skies. Puffins dart and dive with incredible precision. Their wings beat frantically like a child learning to swim. Yet they cut through the air with confident arcs. Some carry fish, others bring back bits of seaweed, a few seem to just fly for fun. Brother Orn hands you a small wax tablet. Note the ones who dip left at the rock shaped like a boot. There, early. You squint. Early for what? He smiles. Whatever comes next. This is not a place of strict enforcement. The monks aren't obsessed with punctuality in the modern sense. They're simply attentive to the world, to the puffins, and to each other. They've trained themselves to watch for changes so subtle they might as well be secrets. And the puffins? They perform their roles without complaint or recognition, like furry little monks in feathered cassocks. You walk back slowly as the evening mist rolls in. Your boots are soaked. Your hands smell faintly of kelp and ink. You've lost all concept of time, which in this monastery might be the most accurate timekeeping of all. Dinner arrives with the appearance of Double-Wink Sigron, a particularly expressive puffin whose distinctive eye movements trigger the lighting of the torches. It's a cozy meal of boiled tubers and dried haddock, eaten in thoughtful silence. Later, lying on your straw mattress, you wonder how you'll ever return to your world of schedules and alerts. Here, you've started to think in feathers and wingspans, in beak tilts and nesting cues. Time in this place doesn't tick. It flutters, and just before you drift off, Brother Gudmund reappears at your window, silhouetted against the violet sky. He bobs once, slowly, as if to say, "Yes. Now sleep." You wake to a strange sensation piece. It clings to your skin like the soft salt mist outside, a kind of ambient stillness broken only by the distant honking of puffins and the steady hush of waves below. You stretch beneath your coarse wool blanket, careful not to disturb the tiny pile of feathers that has somehow gathered on the windowsill overnight. A gift, perhaps, or just the result of puffin preening. Hard to say around here. Today, you're promoted. Not officially, of course. No medals, no speeches. Just a nod from Brother Orm and a bundle of seaweed-bound scrolls that mark you as the day's feather keeper. The title sounds more epic than it is. Your task? To observe puffins from dawn until dusk and note any unusual behavior. You swallow your breakfast of cold fish mash with the gravity of someone about to shoulder a sacred duty. The monks are already at the cliff edge, eyes to the sky, robes flapping like low-budget sails. You join them, your feet squelching on the mossy path. The air smells of iodine, and your cloak has taken on the scent of forever damp. The puffins, however, are radiant beaks gleaming orange and red, their tiny eyes glinting with secrets. They dive and flutter, hop and head tilt like little bishops. Of the air. As feather keeper, your perch is a carved stone bench overlooking the sea. It's surprisingly ergonomic for something 1,000 years old. You place the scrolls beside you, along with a bone stylus and a jar of squid ink that threatens to tip with every gust of wind. Brother Orn explains the basics before returning to his candle making. Each puffin has a pattern. Some mark quarter hours with their landings. Others flap twice before launching, which we interpret as the midpoint between terce and sext. There's one fellow, we call him Theorist, who does a full spin on the hour. Or maybe he's just dizzy. Historians still argue whether the monks were genuinely systematic in their puffin observations, or if these connections evolved slowly, even unconsciously, over generations. What's clear is that the birds were not simply decoration. They were part of the monastery's living clockwork. You take notes as best you can. One puffin lands, scratches its left foot 3 times, and stares directly at you. You scribble something like left foot scratch equals pending, just in case. The scrolls you're writing on are reused parchment-hold prayers faintly visible beneath your new notations. You smile as one puffin waddles across the stone wall, seemingly peering at your work. Editorial input? You ask it. It blinks twice. You take that as a yes. It's not just about writing things down. It's about being present. Watching each movement not with the sharpness of analysis, but with the gentleness of ritual. When one puffin lands with a piece of grass and immediately hops in a circle, Brother Rurik whispers, "That means Complin's early tonight." You raise an eyebrow. Are you sure? No, he replies. But it's happened before. As the hours pass, you fall into the rhythm. The birds, oddly, seem to appreciate your attention. One even lands near your foot and nibbles your bootlaces. You name him Freystine, which feels appropriately dignified for a puffin with no sense of personal space. A mainstream fact to gently drop in here. Puffins spend most of their lives at sea, only returning to land to breed, usually to the exact cliff and even the same burrow year after year. Their loyalty to location is almost monastic. You observe a strange moment mid-afternoon when a group of puffins gathers in a loose triangle. One flaps 3 times, another bobs, and the third simply sneezes. You write it all down, unsure if it means anything or everything. Brother Orn returns and glances at your scroll. Ah, the sneezing triangle. Haven't seen that in years. You're joking, possibly. You share a quiet chuckle, the kind that doesn't disturb the birds. Humor here is light and occasional, like sun peeking through clouds. Enough to warm the soul, but never so much as to dry it out completely. Quirky tidbit time. One surviving Icelandic folktale mentions a monastery where puffins delivered pebbles to the doorstep before storms. Some believe this story was a symbolic retelling of monks noticing that puffins tend to gather and hoard stones before shifts in weather. An observation turned myth through the gentle distortions of oral history. As sunset approaches, you gather your scrolls and return them to the scriptorium. The monks glance over your notes with approving nods, as though your scribbles hold meaning only they understand. Perhaps they do. Dinner is eaten in the glow of seal oil lamps. The soup tonight has hints of nettle and something vaguely nutty. You try not to ask. One monk begins softly playing a bone flute, its notes thin but comforting. The puffins outside, silhouettes now, seem to respond, hopping in rhythm. A few even flutter in closer, as if to listen. Your final duty as feather keeper is to light the wing lantern's 3 small candles, placed at the edge of the cliff to guide any straggling puffins back to their burrows. It's largely symbolic, but it feels real enough. As you place the last candle, Brother Gudman waddles up and pecks the ground once. You take it as a sign that your watch is over. You head to your cell, hands stained with ink and feathers clinging to your sleeves. As you settle in, a gentle wind taps at the window. You look out. The puffins are quiet now, tucked into their burrows like tiny monks beneath feathered blankets. You've kept time today, not in hours and minutes, but in glances and waddles. And though the scrolls may fade and the ink may smudge, something deeper has settled within you. A rhythm, a pulse, a new way of noticing. You lie back, the sound of wings and waves lulling you to sleep. You wake to laughter, not loud or raucous, but the soft, breathy chuckles of monks trying very hard to be serious while clearly failing. You sit up on your straw mattress, crusty-eyed and bleary-brained, and catch the unmistakable scent of something fishy being overcooked in a very determined pot. You shuffle outside and find a group of monks gathered near the edge of the cliff. At the center of their attention, a puffin waddling proudly with what appears to be a stolen parchment in its beak. Brother Rurik sighs. Brother Gujon left his notes unattended again. The monks don't chase the puffin. That would be sacrilege. Instead, they wait patiently as the bird makes a dramatic lap around a boulder, flaps twice, drops the parchment, and hops away like an especially smug librarian. Time to review the rule of St. Puffinus, Brother Orn murmurs with a perfectly straight face. You can't help it. You laugh too. This is the unspoken truth of this place. It's not just solemn silence and wing-based timekeeping. There's a quiet rivalry between monks and puffins that threads through every hour. A game of wits and patience, with mutual affection as the prize, and the puffins win more often than not. Your assignment today is to assist, Brother Benedict in organizing the scriptorium's incident records. These aren't the usual chronicles. OF battles, saints, or harvest yields. No, these are dedicated to Puffin antics. One entry reads, Puffin entered chapel during lauds, sat on lectern, refused to leave, was blessed. Another, Brother Trygve slipped on beak, likely left. Deliberately, Puffin observed from ledge, unmoved. You giggle, earning a raised eyebrow from Benedict. We don't mock the records, he says, although a smile is tugging at the corner of his mouth. We preserve them. Mainstream fact for your sleepy brain. Medieval monks often recorded not only religious and political events, but curious weather patterns, unusual animal sightings, and even jokes. Marginalia and manuscripts reveal that many scribes had a dry, playful wit. One famous example includes a doodle of a knight fighting a snail dot in this monastery. The Puffins are the snails, mysterious, ubiquitous, slightly unnerving. You help transcribe. One particularly chaotic entry that describes the Great Beak Raid of a few years prior, where 6 Puffins allegedly raided the fish pantry in formation and left behind only pebbles as payment. Historians still argue whether the monks exaggerated these tales or believed them fully. But to be fair, Puffins do have a history of gathering shiny objects and carrying them great distances, possibly mistaking them for food, toys, or nesting gifts. You spend part of the afternoon with Brother Ingolf, who trains novice monks in Puffin etiquette. He explains the rules. Never block a Puffin's path, always nod if they nod first, and under no circumstances should you try to outstare one. They win, he whispers. They always win. You try it later. The Puffin stares. You blink. It does not. You lose. There's a particular delight in the way these birds refuse to be tamed, yet happily coexist. They come and go on their own schedule, but they return year after year, nesting in the same burrows, greeting the same monks, stealing the same notes. It's not just a rivalry. It's a relationship. That evening, the monks host a quiet storytelling hour. Everyone sits in a circle near the communal hearth, sipping warm seaweed broth and passing around dried puffin bones carved with runes. Brother Orn begins. Once, long ago, a puffin corrected the abbot's reading of the Psalms. He had mispronounced a word. The puffin squawked. The abbot checked the script. He was wrong. The group nods sagely, as if this is entirely reasonable. You add a story of your own. Today, one watched me drop my inkpot. I think he judged me. Several monks gasp. Which one? You describe the bird's markings, dark streak over one eye, unusually fluffy dot. Brother Benedict whistles. That's Baldur. He rarely speaks unless it's urgent. Consider yourself warned, Brother Rurik mutters, only half joking. Quirky. Tidbit. In some Icelandic folk beliefs, seabirds were thought to be the reincarnated spirits of sailors lost at sea. While this belief wasn't officially part of Christian doctrine, it crept into monastic stories, especially in isolated communities where bird behavior was closely observed and easily mystified. You begin to notice little things. A monk always bowing to a certain puffin before starting his prayers. Another who leaves a dried fish bit near the burrows at Compline. A third who swears his puffin companion mimics his limping walk. You're starting to wonder, who really runs the monastery? You wrap up the evening in the scriptorium, copying a psalm illuminated with a tiny puffin perched on a decorative pea. Brother Benedict peers over your shoulder and nods. That's St. Beakward, patron of punctual arrivals. You try not to snort ink up your nose. The soft scratch of quills fills the room. A nearby monk hums under his breath. Outside, the puffins gather for their last flight of the day, silhouetted against the burnished sky. The light is golden, slow, reluctant to leave. You walk back to your cell under a soft hush of wind. A puffin hops beside you for a few steps, then veers off toward its burrow with no explanation. It's fine. You don't need one dot inside. Your window shows a sky so still it could be painted. You curl into your blanket, exhausted but oddly proud. You've not only witnessed a day of puffin time, you've played the game and maybe, just maybe, earned a draw. You wake to a change in the air. Not colder exactly dash, just dot dot. Sharper. The kind of air that carries secrets. Even before you open your eyes, you can hear the difference. The wind whistles through the turf roofs like a careful librarian, and the puffins are making less noise than usual. Suspiciously so, you pull on your cloak, which is now dry-ish an upgrade from yesterday, and step outside to find Brother Orn already waiting. He's squinting at the horizon, one hand cupped behind his ear like the sea might be trying to confess. Something. Storm's coming, he says, without turning. The puffins told me. You blink blearily. They told you? He nods. Well, technically they didn't bob this morning. Same thing? It sounds absurd. But when you look out over the cliffs, the puffins do seem hesitant. Where normally they'd be waddling and flapping like little clerks late for a meeting, now they're quiet, still, watching the sky. You're assigned to weather duty today specifically to help track puffin signs that hint at incoming storms. Apparently, you're now part of an ancient meteorological practice based entirely on the behavior of tubby seabirds. And surprisingly, it works. Mainstream fact for the curious. Puffins, like many animals, are highly sensitive to changes in barometric pressure. Before storms, they often hunker down or delay their flights, something early Icelandic communities picked up on and, in monastic circles, elevated to a kind of weather gospel. Brother Rurik hands you a thin slate and points to a puffin, poking its head out of a burrow, then quickly retreating. Mark that, burrow peak and retreat. Classic rain cue. You write it down, feeling slightly ridiculous, but also increasingly intrigued. Another puffin waddles halfway up the hill, squawks once, then heads back down. Cross-reference that. With wind direction, Brother Orn advises, you do. Though your shorthand is devolving into doodles. Puffin with umbrella, puffin doing the moonwalk, puffin in existential crisis. Still, there's a rhythm to this strange system. You realize that after watching them long enough, the puffins almost make sense. Almost. It's like trying to understand a language that only speaks in shrugging. Later in the day, the wind picks up, snapping cloaks and tugging at hoods. The sea turns from steel gray to something darker, angrier, like a cauldron mid-broil. The monks begin their storm preparations, tying down fishing nets, covering manuscript shelves, and reinforcing burrow entrances with small stones. Yes, you heard. That right. They protect the puffin burrows. It's mutual, Brother Ingolf explains. They give us time. We give them shelter. You're tasked with helping carry bundles of dried seaweed to stuff into burrow gaps. The puffins don't resist, in fact. One simply waits until you've secured the entrance, then pokes its head out and blinks at you as if to say, took you long enough. You nod, you're welcome. Quirky tidbit. Some medieval Icelandic texts mention weather monks, figures believed to have a spiritual connection to the elements. These were likely just highly observant men who watched birds, winds and clouds, but the aura of mystery clung to them, especially when their predictions proved accurate. As the storm edges closer, you return to the scriptorium. The wind groans through the walls and the candle flames perform nervous jigs. Brother Benedict flips through a scroll labeled Beak Wind Patterns, Year of Many Leaks. You don't ask about the title. See here, he points. In years past, puffins gathered inland before large storms. Did you notice anything like that? You think back. Some waddled higher up the hill. He nods. Good. That's a hill climb warning. Not always right, but more often than not. Historians still argue whether these so-called avian patterns were ever formalized or if monks were just making their best guesses in a very windy world. But whatever the truth, it gave structure to uncertainty, and sometimes that's enough. By late afternoon, the clouds have knit themselves into a heavy gray quilt. The sea below churns, waves stacking over each other like pages in a slammed book. The puffins have vanished into their burrows. The monks huddle near the chapel, singing vespers low and slow, as if not to wake the storm. You stand beside Brother Orn, who's tying down a roof patch with a length of kelp rope. I still think it's going to veer east, he mutters. The puffins twitched left earlier. You squint. Is that a thing? It is now. The rain arrives in careful drops, then all at once. A sheet of cold water slaps your face and trickles down your collar. You're soaked before you can swear. The monks move without panic. This isn't new to them. They know which walls leak, which buckets to place, and which pages to turn face down to avoid curling. Inside your cell, the candle sputters but holds. Brother Gudman doesn't show up tonight. Probably hunkered down like the rest. You stare out into the rain-slicked darkness, listening to the rhythmic roar of wind and sea, and feel a strange comfort. The puffins saw it coming. The monks trusted them. And now, here you all are, riding it out together. Dinner is postponed or possibly drowned. Instead, you chew on a cold fish biscuit and sip warm brine from a clay cup. It's oddly satisfying. Just before sleep, Brother Orn knocks softly on your door. He hands you a slate with a scribble of a puffin wearing a crown and the words, "Storm." "Prophet, nice work." You smile, press it to your chest, and lie back on the straw mattress, listening as the storm weaves lullabies into the night air. The puffins were right, again. The morning smells like soggy moss, wet fish, and triumph. The storm has passed. You emerge from your cell bleary-eyed and blinking, unsure if the puffins survived the night or packed up and moved to mainland Europe. The wind has calmed, the sea hums instead of shouts, and the sky miraculously is soft blue, as though embarrassed about yesterday's outburst. Down by the cliffs, the monks are already at work. One is wringing out a soaked psalter. Another is gently prodding the turf roof with a stick like it might have developed opinions overnight.
Brother Orn waves you over. We've got candle duty.
Candle duty, it turns out, is one of the most sacred rituals in the monastery, not because of the candles themselves, but because of what they mark. Time. The monks don't follow conventional clocks, and puffins, while reliable, aren't very illuminating after sunset. So they use candles. But not just any candles. These are made with cod liver oil and tallow, dyed faintly with kelp ash and marked with notches. One candle equals roughly 1 monastic hour. Roughly being the operative word. You sit in the candle room, which smells exactly like it sounds, and help Brother Benedict trim wicks and scratch time markers onto the sides using a heated bone pin. "This one's for terse," he says, pointing to a candle stub. "See how the puffin beak is etched in?" You lean in. Sure enough, there's a tiny engraving of a beak next to the third notch. That's when Brother Samunder's puffin usually flaps twice and squawks, he explains. The connection is charming and a little absurd, but it makes sense here. The candles are synced not with bells or bells with candles, but both with birds. Mainstream fact time. Before mechanical clocks became widespread, monasteries often used candle candles with evenly spaced markings that burned at a consistent rate. Some orders added colored threads or metal balls that dropped into trays to audibly mark the hour. In Iceland, candle making evolved with available materials, including whale fat, fish oils, and driftwood molds. Here, though, the monks don't light candles at precise intervals. They light them when puffin behavior suggests the hour has turned. Assist with the lighting for sext, the midday prayer. A puffin circles 3 times over the chapel roof, a known signal, apparently, and Brother Orn nods to you. You light the next candle, its flame sputtering for a moment before catching whiff. A gentle whoosh. It smells like ambition and seaweed. The chapel fills slowly, the monks filing in, robes damp and sand-flecked from storm cleanup. The chant begins, echoing softly against the stone walls. You sit in the back, candle in hand, and let the rhythm settle into your bones. Later, over lunch, which consists of boiled turnips and something described as cliff cabbage, you sit with Brother Rurik, who shows you an older set of candles. These are wrapped in sealskin and marked not just with hours but puffin names: Baldur, Snorri, Sigrun. Each candle once corresponded to a bird known for regular habits. Snorri, Rurik explains, used to bob his head every evening at nones. Like clockwork. Still around? Sadly no. Eaten by a fox. The new Snorri isn't as punctual. You consider a moment of silence but instead sip your brine tea. Quirky tidbit for today. Some monastic communities used birds not just for telling time, but for marking transitions between seasons. In parts of medieval Britain and Scandinavia, owl calls, swan migrations, or the arrival of certain gulls were seen as natural calendar alerts, especially in areas too cold or dark for sundials or bells to function year-round. You return to the candle workshop and help prepare the next set. For vigils, Brother Benedict encourages you to listen to the candles as they burn. Each one hisses differently, he says, depending on what the puffins have been doing. You stare at him. You're joking. He gives a perfectly serene smile. Mostly. Time in this monastery doesn't feel like something to measure, it feels like something to accompany. You don't chase it or contain it. You walk beside it, with a puffin under one arm and a candle in the other. The afternoon is devoted to recalibrating the midnight flame, a special candle used when puffin behavior can no longer be observed. It's long, thick, and shaped with a spiral of dried feather embedded down the side. When the feather catches fire, you know it's time to move on to the next hour. You test it. The feather curls like a sleeping cat, then dissolves in an elegant puff of smoke. The monks nod approvingly. As twilight creeps in, the puffins return to the cliffs, flapping lazily, heavy with fish and existential wisdom. One lands beside you and blinks slowly. You offer it a crumb of dried kelp bread. It accepts barely. That evening, after the final candle has guttered out, the monks gather outside in the soft dark. The storm has scrubbed the sky clean. Stars shimmer overhead like frost on velvet. The puffins nestle into their burrows. All is still. You sit with the monks and stare into the glow of a single ember, the last warmth of the day. No one speaks. There's no need. You feel the weight of the hours not as burdens, but as friends who've passed quietly by, each one marked with flickering light and a distant flap of wings. Tomorrow more candles will be lit. More puffins will signal. And time, in its strange and soothing way, will keep waddling forward. The morning begins with a carving knife, a hunk of driftwood, and the smell of slightly overcooked nettle tea. You've been summoned to assist in crafting the monastery's puffin calendar. Yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. Brother Rurik hands you a worn block of driftwood about the length of your forearm and the texture of a forgotten sponge cake. It's dotted with notches, cuts, and one very confident puffin doodle. This, he explains, is our seasonal calendar. Not months, not weeks, just beak marks. You stare at the wood. It looks like something a bored squirrel might have whittled during a long winter. How does it work? He gestures for you to follow him out to the eastern ridge, the one where the puffins like to practice group landings and synchronized waddles. Each season, we mark the first appearance of a behavior. Puffins burrowing again? That's a notch. Puffins returning. In groups of 3? Notch. Puffins standing very still while judging your life choices? Definitely a notch. You sit cross-legged on a lichen-dappled rock, carving knife in hand, and watch the cliffs below. Sure enough, a group of puffins emerges from the burrows. One tilts its head to the sky, lets out a single squeaky honk, and is promptly ignored. By the others. That's a migration rehearsal, Brother Rurik says. Means we're about 3 notches from the solstice. Mainstream fact alert. While medieval Icelandic monasteries did track the Christian liturgical calendar, their daily rhythms often aligned more closely with the land and sea. With no access to accurate timepieces or even reliable sunlight for sundials, monks turned to birds, animal migrations, and the behavior of local flora to mark larger seasonal shifts. You carve a small beak-shaped groove into the driftwood. There, Rurik nods, the day of the mock honk. Is that official? Only. Since now, each mark on the calendar represents not just time, but memory. A puffin who returned too early. A particularly fishy spring. The year the feathers didn't molt until after the first frost. These birds, with their stubby wings and eternal squint, have become archivists. By midday, you're elbow deep in wood shavings, your knees numb, and your hands slightly blistered. But the calendar grows a living history etched into beachcomb timber. One section is even shaped like a wing, each feather slot filled with tiny symbols, swirls for wind, dots for hatching, triangles for puffins acting weird. Brother Orn joins you for lunch, carrying 2 bowls of lukewarm dulse broth and what might be puffin-shaped bread rolls. He tears one in half and sighs happily. You know, in some years we used feathers instead of carvings. Tied them to strings. Let them flutter in the wind. But feathers rot. Driftwood endures. You chew your bread thoughtfully. It's mostly crust, slightly sea-sunted, but comfortingly warm. Quirky tidbit for the day. One fragment of an Icelandic monastery ledger preserved only in part contains what some believe is a puffin-based forecast chart. Lines like, if beaks open before high sun, rain shall come after the 3rd prayer, and tail flick thrice at moon's edge means delay thy harvest, suggest a symbolic language built on long observation and perhaps just a bit of monkly whimsy. In the afternoon, you help mount the finished calendar into its designated alcove, hollowed-out section of basalt that faces the sea. It's not behind glass. There's no display placard. Just the driftwood, nestled gently in the stone, waiting for the wind to speak. Brother Benedict steps back and nods. She hold for another year? She? All good calendars are female. Everyone knows that. The puffins begin to gather again, and the monks sit on the low wall facing the burrows. You join them, the air humming with that late-day hush that only happens when birds, men, and CL agree to quiet down. One puffin hops up onto the calendar. Alcove stares at your carving and pecks it once with what you swear is approval. First editorial review. Brother Orn murmurs. Later, you're invited into the storeroom where older calendars are kept. Some are driftwood, others carved bone, one is made from compressed seaweed hardened with salt. The oldest is no more than a lump of lava rock, etched with what look like spirals and tally marks, but every monk treats it like a relic. Some say it's pre-Christian. Benedict whispers. Some say it's a puffin's dream. Is that a metaphor? Maybe. Historians still argue whether these puffin calendars were symbolic tools for spiritual reflection or practical, if eccentric timekeepers. The monastery records are frustratingly poetic on the matter. Phrases like the day the beak opened and when the wing shadow fell don't help modern scholars much. But here, they make perfect sense. As night falls, you sit in your cell and light your own small candle, freshly notched. It's your first solo mark on the new Puffin calendar, and it feels oddly significant. Outside, Brother Gudmund has resumed his post. He shifts slightly as if to remind you that carving better be accurate. You nod solemnly. Time in this place isn't ticking, it's accumulating, mark by mark, beak by beak. A living archive of bird and man sharing space, rhythm, and just a pinch of competitive judgment. You blow out the candle and let sleep settle in. You're awoken this morning not by a puffin, but by parchment. A long, slightly wrinkled scroll has been slid under your door, scrawled with tidy monk handwriting and sealed with a dab of something that smells suspiciously like pickled fish paste. You unroll it carefully and find an invitation. Today you shall learn how puffins made their way into the margins of the divine. Signed simply, Brother Benedict. You shuffle to the scriptorium, the morning mist clinging to your robe like affectionate laundry. The air is thick with the smell of ink, dried seaweed glue, and old vellum. It's warmer than usual inside, the hearth fire crackling gently as a pot of ink bubbles beside it. The monks are already seated, each hunched over a piece of parchment, their quills fluttering like seabird wings. Brother Benedict waves you over and pulls out a psalter and illuminated manuscript glowing with gold leaf and faded red ink. But what catches your eye isn't the scripture. It's the puffin. Right there in the corner of a decorated capital B is a tiny, absurdly round puffin, halo and all, standing next to a stylized monk, both watching the sunrise. You blink. Is that St. Peter with a puffin? Indeed. Benedict replies, his voice soft with reverence and a hint of pride. We call him Peter the Patient. The puffin was added to remind us that divine timing is not always punctual, but it is always purposeful. You lean in to examine the marginalia further. Puffins appear in odd corners, beside passages on wisdom, humility, and even divine wrath. One puffin seems to be scolding a tiny devil. Another is perched atop a loaf of bread, looking pleased with itself. Mainstream fact break. While puffins don't appear in mainstream Christian iconography, medieval manuscripts are filled with marginal creatures, snails jousting, rabbits brandishing, swords and cats chasing priests. These weren't always jokes. Often, they carried subtle commentary or allegorical meaning. In isolated communities like this one, monks had a freer hand to weave local fauna into sacred art. You're handed a quill goose feather, well-trimmed, and a blank scrap of calfskin. Try it, Benedict says. Draw the puffin as you see. Him. You hesitate, then sketch a squat, rounded body, a beak with a little flare, and eyes that suggest they know more than you do. The monks peek at your attempt and nod encouragingly, one even whispering, "That's got good skepticism in the posture." You spend the morning copying small decorative initials, each incorporating a puffin in some form tucked in a loop, balancing on a tail, or peeking mischievously from the inked folds of a monk's robe. Quirky tidbit of the day. There's a preserved Icelandic book of hours in which a puffin appears alongside every passage referencing time or patience. Scholars debate whether it was the work of one overly bird-obsessed scribe or if the entire order had adopted the puffin as a timekeeping mascot. Either way, the effect is endearing and oddly profound. Benedict shows you a special scroll. The liturgical beak. It's a sort of illustrated guide where puffin gestures correspond to theological concepts. A puffin looking upward equals hope. A puffin headbutting another puffin equals spiritual correction. A puffin asleep on its side equals divine rest. It's mostly metaphor, he adds with a wink. But also, Brother Orn swears it helped him through a particular long Lent. After a short break, seaweed tea and dry bread with fish butter, you're shown the monastic beakpin, a quill carved from puffin feathers. We only use them on feast days, Benedict explains, and during the week of St. Gudlog the Sleepy. You're handed a dulled beakman to try. It smells faintly of feathers and seawater. The ink flows slowly, reluctantly, like it knows it's headed for a very slow joke. You manage to inscribe a small verse from the Psalms. Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Beneath it, you draw a puffin counting pebbles. Brother Benedict claps your shoulder approvingly. You're beginning to understand the aesthetic. The afternoon passes in a blur of parchment, puffin flourishes, and the soft scrape of styluses. Outside, the birds soar and dive, unconcerned with your efforts to immortalize them. You're invited to the collation reading where monks share passages aloud while others illuminate the margins. It's not performed with booming voices or dramatic flair. It's quiet, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. And every passage is met with a shared glance and the faint scratch of a puffin being added. Somewhere small. One monk paints a puffin balancing a candlestick. Another sketches a puffin quietly sleeping beside a scroll. Someone adds a puffin with wings outstretched next to the line. My soul waits more than watchmen for the morning. Historians still argue whether these illustrations were meant purely for amusement or if they served as meditative tools, visual anchors for contemplation, particularly in the dim, damp evenings when time blurred and puffins were the only reliable sign of change. As dusk settles, the scriptorium is bathed in golden candlelight. The room glows like a reliquary, and your final task is to carefully store your work in the wax paper folders beneath the hearthstones, safe from moisture and mischief. You head back to your cell, your hands ink-stained and your mind heavy, with the image of a puffin soaring beside scripture. The monastery has no official saints for timekeeping, but here, the humble puffin fills that role, fluttering across margins with serene absurdity. Outside, Brother Gudman waits, one eye closed. In what might be sleepy approval, you nod to him, the way one artist nods to another, and then you sleep. Today begins with an argument, a very quiet, very polite, profoundly sleep-deprived theological argument between two monks over what can only be described as bikaglock. You're seated at breakfast, lukewarm porridge that may or may not contain last night's nettles when Brother Ingolf and Brother Rurik begin their debate. It starts with a simple disagreement over the timing of matins. One insists the puffin stirred precisely 20 minutes earlier than expected. The other claims they stirred later and that his notes, now soggy from cod oil, prove it. Brother Orn tries to mediate with a spoon. No one's doubting the puffins, he says gently. We're just interpreting the beak data differently. You? Blink? Beak data? They all nod, as though you've asked what water is. Soon, scrolls are unrolled. Diagrams emerge. A puffin feather is brought out for emphasis. This, it turns out, is a common occurrence in the monastery. The semi-annual squabble of the schedule, where monks review their seasonal notes and recalibrate how puffin behaviors align with canonical hours. And like any sacred tradition, it's as much performance as procedure. The main point of contention? Whether a double-wing flap counts as one action or two. Mainstream fact. In many medieval communities without mechanical clocks, timekeeping was necessarily approximate. Disputes arose over candle burn rates, shadow lengths, or bell tones. In Iceland, where sunlight was unreliable and bells cracked from cold, behavioral cues, especially from animals, became central. And like all systems based on interpretation, they were open to debate. Brother Benedict leads a small group to reenact the Great Puffin Disagreement of 1239, complete with mock feathers and a chalk drawing of a confused puffin balancing on a sundial. You suspect this is more theater than theology, but no one breaks character. You, now fully roped into the process, are asked to consult your own observations. You present your note-scribbled puffin diagrams, directional beak, tilts, and one slightly panicked drawing labeled possible puffin yawn. The monks examine your data seriously. One adjusts his spectacles. Another scratches his beard. Clearly mid-terse, Brother Rurik mutters. Or at least pre-nun. Assuming the puffin wasn't just bored, Brother Ingolf counters. Quirky. Tidbit of the day. Some surviving Icelandic manuscripts include marginal glosses indicating bird-noted times. These annotations aren't consistent, but references like wing stilled at prime or burrow shadow long past lauds suggest that monks used avian cues not just in poetry or parable, but as functional temporal signposts. Eventually, the monks convene in the chapel for a formal review. You sit cross-legged on the stone floor, cold seeping into your bones but curiosity keeping you awake. The Council of the Feathered Hours, as they call it, proceeds with all the ceremony. Of a royal coronation minus the velvet and plus a lot more beak talk. Each monk presents his interpretation. Some reference wind direction, others note which burrow a puffin exited first. One simply brings a stone he claims the puffin looked at in a very time-specific way. Brother Orn closes the debate with a brief chant and a shrug. As always, he says, the puffins agree. It's us who can't keep up. That seems to settle it. From then on, the new time is set. Candles are re-notched, prayer schedules slightly adjusted, and a puffin-shaped hourglass is turned with great care. You're invited to the timekeeping workshop, a mossy alcove filled with feathers, string, and what looks suspiciously like an astrolabe modified to resemble a bird bath. There, you help calibrate the beak index, a piece of driftwood inscribed. With seasonal puffin signals, flaps, waddles, hops, and the rare but revered stand on one foot while judging silently. You contribute your own entry. Beak stretch followed by sneeze equals probable candle relighting. It's added to the margin with reverence. Later, Brother Benedict pulls you aside and shares a thin, sea-stained scroll titled On the Limits of Puffin Certainty. Written in a tight, fussy hand, it cautions against idolizing the beak and reminds the reader that divine time is not always bird time. We consult the puffins, he says, but we don't worship them. You nod, though you suspect a few of the monks might disagree, particularly the one who carved a puffin onto his prayer beads. The evening brings a small feast, boiled root vegetables and something called celebration fish paste, which tastes like regular fish paste but with more sincerity. The monks raise wooden cups of kelp wine and toast, to the keepers of time, winged and otherwise. Outside, the puffins begin their nightly rituals. You watch one preen hop and settle beside a rock, exactly as it did yesterday and likely as it will tomorrow. It's comforting in its quiet insistence. Historians still argue whether the monks truly believed puffins were divine messengers or simply adopted them out of necessity. But here, belief and practicality blur. The beak points to prayer, the wing marks the hour, and the silence between flaps tells you everything else. That night, as you drift to sleep, Brother Gudman perches once more at your window. He doesn't move, just watches as your candle burns. You close your eyes, trusting that, whatever time it truly is, he'll let you know when it's right to wake. You wake to a curious stillness, not silence, but the sort of quiet that makes you feel like something is missing. The puffins haven't started their morning procession. No wing flaps, no squawks, no faint thud of beak meeting moss dot. It's disconcerting. You pull on your robe and step into the corridor, where a few monks are gathered near the chapel door, listening. They tilt their heads in unison like birds themselves. The bells, Brother Rurik murmurs. They didn't ring. He's right. Normally, the soft chime of the monastery's little bell a battered bronze cup, suspended on a string of driftwood signals the first hour of prayer. But not today. Today, the bell sits untouched, its rope coiled in the corner like a sleepy snake. You follow the others outside. Where the air is thick with fog and the sea hums like a distant organ, the puffins are quiet. Some remain tucked in their burrows. Others perch still and silent, as if contemplating a career change. Brother Orn explains the situation. Our bell cracked last night. You blink. Cracked? He leads you to the modest bell tower, or rather, the rock outcropping where the monastery's single bell hangs. Sure enough, a hairline fracture runs down its side. One more good ring and it'll shatter like overbaked bread crust. It's been through many winters, Orn says, patting it affectionately. This one may have been its last. The monks gather for an emergency meeting. You're invited to join since, according to Brother Benedict, you have puffin sensitivity now. The issue, without the bell, timekeeping becomes less structured. The puffins help, of course, but not everyone agrees on their cues, as yesterday's debate so thoroughly proved. Something must take the bell's place. And so, in what might be the most delightfully odd turn of events yet, the monks decide to try puffin-based sound signals. Not from the puffins themselves, mind you. They're not about to strap bells to beaks. No, they plan to replicate puffin calls manually at key prayer intervals. You are issued a puffin pipe, a short reed flute carved to imitate the nasal honk of a slightly irritated puffin. It sounds ridiculous, which is to say, it sounds perfect. Mainstream fact. Before the proliferation of church bells, many monastic communities used a variety of auditory cues to mark the hours, including horn blasts, clapping, and even calls by designated wake monks. Imitative bird calls, though rare in the historical record, have precedent in some early Scandinavian rituals, tied to migratory seasons and hunting calendars. You're given the honor of testing the first call. Standing at the cliff edge. Puffin. Pipe in hand, you wait until the fog shifts just enough to reveal a group of monks watching expectantly. You blow. It produces a sound that can only be described as a kazoo with opinions. The puffins freeze. One cocks its head dramatically. Then, as if nothing has happened, it waddles away. The monks nod. Good pitch, one says. That'll work for lauds. Over the next few hours, you experiment with call tones, short for prime, low for sext, warbling for complin. A few monks take the task very seriously, developing elaborate breathing techniques to ensure consistency. One proposes a harmony system, which is quickly vetoed as tempting showmanship. You record the calls in a scroll now titled Auditory Puffin Hour Replications Experimental. Your notation system is a mix of musical symbols, puffin doodles, and frantic notes like too goosey. Try again. Quirky tidbit. One preserved Icelandic psalm includes an odd refrain scholars long debated. Recently, a theory emerged that it mimicked a seabird's cry used by the monks to indicate time changes during long bell-less winters. The exact bird? Possibly a puffin. Probably a puffin. The system, surprisingly, begins to work. By late afternoon, you and Brother Rurik manage a synchronized 9 o'clock honk, followed by quiet chanting. The puffins, unfazed, continue their routines. One even seems to bob in time. That evening, after vigils heralded by a low, almost mournful puffin call from Brother Orn, the monks gather in the chapel to bless the cracked bell one last time. It's not removed. It stays, silent and dignified, a relic of an older rhythm now layered with feathers and song. You light a candle and place it beneath the bell's rope. Outside, the fog clears enough to reveal a line of puffins perched along the edge of the wall watching. Do you think they approve? You whisper. Brother Benedict nods slowly. They were here long before the bell. They'll be here long after. You sleep that night with a puffin pipe resting beside your bed like a sacred relic or a poorly tuned recorder. It smells of reed and salt, and when you drift into dreams, You hear faint bird calls echoing against stone and sea dot, and somehow they tell you the hour exactly. The Puffins are restless today, and so are the monks. You step outside and nearly trip over a wooden crate filled with preserved fish and woven mats. A sure sign something's afoot. Monasteries don't normally prepare this much dried cod unless something or someone is coming. Pilgrims, Brother Rurik says, wiping puffin feathers off a barrel. 3 of them. Maybe 4 if the old one makes it across the fjord. Pilgrims. You hadn't considered that others might journey here. Intentionally. You glance at the narrow trail winding from the mainland, soggy and half-eaten by moss. It's not exactly an inviting entrance. And yet, people come. They heard about the birds. Brother Orn mutters, a little too casually. He means it literally. Word has apparently spread across northern Iceland of monks who follow puffin time, who read the weather in feathers, who replace their cracked bell with bird calls and reverent squawks. You help prepare the guest cell, a slightly larger room, with 2 whole candles and a blanket that's only mildly crunchy. The Puffins, for their part, seem intrigued. One lingers in the hallway, eyeing the door with a tilt of curiosity that suggests it's evaluating the pilgrims. Worthiness. Mainstream fact for the day. Pilgrimage in the medieval world wasn't limited to famous shrines and relics. Many undertook quieter, more personal journeys to remote monasteries, holy islands, or rumored sites of unusual devotion. Iceland, with its sparse but devout Christian communities, saw its share of wandering seekers, particularly in the summer months. By mid-morning, you spot them. 3 figures crest the hill, one walking with surprising speed, another hunched beneath a heavy pack, and a third lagging behind with the posture of someone who deeply regrets bringing 2 pairs of shoes. The monks gather near the main path, humming a low welcome chant. You notice that a few puffins have assembled too, forming an oddly formal half-circle like avian greeters. The pilgrims bow, remove their hoods, and introduce themselves. Odild, a weaver seeking peace from dreams. Kettle, a fisherman plagued by tides he doesn't understand. And Bjarne, who claims he was told to come here by a bird with opinions. The monks don't even flinch. You're placed in charge of orientation. Explain the rules, brother. Benedict tells you, gently. You walk the newcomers through the basics. Meals are determined by puffin activity. Silence is observed when puffins are napping. If a puffin lands on your shoulder, you're probably doing fine. No correcting the timekeepers unless you've spoken to at least 3 birds and received matching. Flaps. The pilgrims absorb this with varying levels of confusion and acceptance. Bjarne seems utterly delighted. He immediately begins sketching puffins in the margins of his travel psalter. Odild mutters that she thought this place would be more normal. Kettle simply nods, as if everything suddenly makes sense. Quirky tidbit. In one rare Icelandic pilgrim's journal from the late 13th century, a traveler describes arriving at a feathered monastery where monks sang not to bells, but to birds. The manuscript is fragmentary, but it includes the line, "Their clocks were beaks, and the air beat with sacred wings." You help prepare the evening meal, an unusually festive affair. There's roasted root mash, pickled kelp bundles, and even a treat, smoked seabird eggs served on flatbread. One monk plays the bone flute while puffins gather at the windows, blinking slowly like sleepy choir masters. The pilgrims are seated near the hearth, where Brother Rurik regales them with tales of famous puffin prophecies. One involved the discovery of a lost relic after a puffin tripped over it. Another recalls the time a puffin refused to leave a sleeping monk's chest until he admitted he'd skipped morning prayers. That monk was me. Rurik adds, "She was right, I had." Later, the pilgrims are invited to the evening watch, where they're each paired with a monk to observe and record puffin behavior. Bjarni enthusiastically reports that his assigned puffin winked at him twice and sneezed, which he interprets as a sign I should stop fishing and become a baker. Odilde says nothing, but stares at her puffin companion with intense suspicion. Kettle simply watches, silent and calm, his breathing falling into rhythm with the bird's waddling path. You end the night in the chapel where a few monks sing. A lullaby in low Icelandic tones, barely louder than the wind. The pilgrims sit cross-legged on the stone floor, hands open, eyes heavy. Brother Gudmund arrives late, hopping in through the side entrance and perching on his usual windowsill. He doesn't join the song, but his presence seems to complete the chorus dot as the final note fades. Brother Benedict closes his psalter and whispers, "They'll sleep well tonight." You glance at the pilgrims, already dozing in soft candlelight, and realize he's right. They've come seeking something strange, yes, but also something reliable. And in this monastery ruled by feathers and ritual and silence, they've found it. Before sleep, you jot a final note in your scroll. Puffins served as greeters, observers and possibly spiritual midwives to pilgrims with aching souls. It sounds dramatic, but here, it feels right. It begins with silence, a heavy woolen silence that blankets the cliffs. You notice it first when you open your cell window and Brother Gudmund isn't there. The stone ledge is empty. No sleepy blink, no mild judgment. Just wind that you step into. The corridor, where a few monks are already murmuring low and puzzled. The usual morning sounds are missing. No flap of wings. No beaky footfalls. No honk to mark the start of terce. The puffins are gone, or nearly gone. You rush out toward the main bluff, your boots thudding softly against dew-slick moss. Brother Orn is already there, standing still as a stone. You follow his gaze to the sea. The puffins have taken flight. Not in pairs, not in clusters. In great sweeping V's that darken the pale morning sky. Thousands of them, winging westward in low, gliding formation. The season has turned. They're leaving, Brother Rurik says behind you, his voice tinged with awe and a pinch of heartbreak. You want to ask why. Why today? Why all at once? But the monks simply nod, accepting the departure like old friends. Seeing off a beloved guest who always leaves without warning. Mainstream fact to anchor you. Atlantic puffins spend only a few months of the year on land, coming ashore to breed and nest. The rest of their lives are spent at sea, solitary, quiet, almost impossible to track. Their departure is sudden and seldom predictable, tied loosely to changes in wind, food supply, and the ancient rhythms of the ocean. You stand there watching, shoulder to shoulder with the monks and the few remaining pilgrims. One of the birds makes a lazy circle overhead, then vanishes into the rising mist. It feels like the ending of something you didn't know had started. The monastery shifts immediately. Without the puffins, the timekeeping collapses. Lauds comes late. Sext is guessed at. The bone flute is played out of tune, and one monk accidentally lights the wrong candle notch, leading to soup being served a full hour early, scandalous by local standards. The monks try not to seem rattled, but they are. Not frantic, just off-kilter. Like a choir missing its alto section. Brother Benedict sighs as he stares at his blank scroll. It's like trying to write without vowels. You're tasked with helping reconfigure the candle schedule. The monks sit huddled in the scriptorium, trying to remember what life was like before puffin time. They consult old texts, one labeled Timekeeping Without Beak and another, far more grimly titled, The Silent Months. There's a drawing of a sun in one, but it's crossed out and replaced with a puffin. They've left before, Brother Orn says quietly. They always do, but the absence doesn't get easier. You step outside alone for a moment, wandering. Past the empty burrows. Some are lined with feathers, others with pebbles and tiny bones. You crouch by one and peer inside. Darkness, stillness. You feel like you're looking into the past. Quirky tidbit. In certain Icelandic legends, puffins were said to vanish into the underworld during winter, not out of fear, but to deliver news to the deep. They were considered messengers between the cold surface and what lay below, ferrying word of human happenings to forgotten gods of sea and stone. Back inside, Brother Ingolf attempts to imitate a puffin call in the chapel, just to see if any stragglers respond. It echoes awkwardly, bounces off stone, and is met only by the skeptical gaze of a passing gull dot. With the puffins gone, the monks must rely on older methods. You help bring out a battered water clock that's more mold than mechanism. One monk tries to use his shadow, but the sun refuses to cooperate. "We could guess," someone mutters. "Guessing is heresy." Someone else replies, half joking. Propose a compromise. A temporary schedule based on candle drift, wind direction, and gut feeling. "It's not puffin time," Brother Benedict sighs, "but it will have to do." You all sit in a circle that night, watching the last candle burn low. It's quiet, not reverent, but unsettled. The puffins took the rhythm with them, and now the monastery is slightly out of step. Brother Gudmund hasn't returned. His ledge remains empty. You leave a small crumb of bread there anyway. The pilgrims pack quietly the next morning. Bjarni offers a small sketch of a puffin with outstretched wings. Kettle leaves behind a stone shaped like a beak. Odild presses your hand and says, "Thank you for the silence." And then they're gone too, fading into the mist like the birds they followed here. The monks resume their prayers, their gardening, their candle trimming. But everything is softer now, slower. Even the wind seems less certain of itself. As you drift to sleep that night, you stare out the window at the empty ledge and whisper, "Come back soon." There's no answer, just the sound of waves and the long, patient hush of waiting. You sleep longer now. There's no puffin outside your window to squawk you awake. No synchronized flap to signal breakfast. The monks rise slower, their robes dragging a little more heavily across the stone floor. The whole monastery feels muffled. And last night, you had the dream. It starts with silence, as all important dreams do. You're walking through the scriptorium, except the scrolls are fluttering. Not in the wind, but as if breathing. The parchments inhale and exhale, their inked letters shifting like waves. You look down, and your feet are bare, cold against the worn floor. A soft rustling builds in your ears, not unpleasant. Feathers brushing against stone. You turn a corner and see them. Puffins. Dozens, sitting on benches, perched on candle stands, one even standing reverently on the lectern. They're facing forward, utterly silent. One of them, Brother Gudmund, you're certain, turns his head toward you. His eyes glimmer with knowing, his beak faintly aglow in the dream's golden light. He does not speak. But somehow, you understand, time does not belong to you. You borrow it, then return it, like feathers in the wind. When you wake, you feel no fear, only a strange fullness, like you've heard something sacred and immediately forgotten it. The monastery is still quiet, but now you move through it with a new awareness. Every creak of the door, every flicker of candlelight feels like a beat in some larger rhythm you hadn't quite tuned into until now. You find Brother Orn in the scriptorium, staring at a half-finished scroll. You dreamt it too, didn't you? He asks, not looking up. You nod. They were listening. He smiles. They always were. Mainstream fact, medieval monks, especially those in isolated orders, often recorded vivid dreams and visions, treating them not as mere imagination, but as spiritual insight. Dream journaling, paired with contemplation and even communal discussion, played a surprisingly large role in early monastic life. Later that morning, Brother Benedict suggests a new project, transcribing your collective dreams. You join a circle of monks, each taking turns recalling the fragments that linger. I saw a puffin arranging stars. One says, I heard wings counting backwards, says another. I became the candle, mutters Brother Ingolf to nods of quiet understanding. You record each one, not to analyze, but to honor. Then you begin crafting a new manuscript, Visiones per Beckham, Visions by the Beak. Its pages are filled with elegant puffin-shaped initials, stars drawn like fish, prayers that drift slowly across the vellum in curling lines like waves on the tide. Quirky tidbit. A now-lost Icelandic text described in the 17th century by a Danish collector reportedly contained dream songs of monks who claimed to hear bird voices during sleep. The songs were transcribed phonetically and paired with odd notations, feather strokes, tail flick symbols, even a series of tiny beaks in ascending sizes. You take a break near the cliff's edge, where a faint wind presses against your skin, like a lullaby trying to remember its tune. You close your eyes, breathing in the salt, the cold, the silence. And in that moment, you realize something. The puffins never left. They're here in the scrolls, in the candles, in the way the monks sit slightly crooked to mimic their winged companions. They live in your muscle memory, your instincts, your slowly adjusted breathing. Brother Rurik joins you, carrying a bundle of feather-shed remnants from earlier weeks. He lets them fall into the wind, where they drift like blessings over the sea. Each one held time, he murmurs. You nod. Now they hold memory. That evening, the monks hold a rare night vigil, not to pray for anything, but simply to sit in shared silence. Candles are lit, one after another, each flame passed from hand to hand like a slow echo. The chapel fills with golden hush. Then someone hums. Not a chant, not a hymn, just a gentle melody. No words. Just the sound of feather. Might make if it could hum its way through nightfall. The others join in, one by one, until the chapel vibrates with soft music. Not harmony exactly, but something close. Something kind. And then you hear it. Outside, faint, distant, impossible. A squawk. Just one, then gone. You look around. No one says a word. No one needs to. You finish the vigil with the final candle, pressing it into a small puffin-shaped holder carved from basalt. It fits perfectly. You walk back to your cell feeling lighter, steadier, as if time itself had exhaled and agreed to wait a little longer. And just before you sleep, the dream returns. Time, the puffin speaks. Time flies, it says, with a beak twixt that might be a wink, but sometimes it lands. The candle burns low in your cell, its flame bobbing slightly as if nodding in agreement with your heartbeat. You wake slowly, not because anyone calls for you, not because a beak raps gently on your windowsill, but because the rhythm of this place has woven itself into your bones. There is no schedule anymore, not in the old sense. And yet, everything continues gently, softly, as though the monastery has learned to breathe without checking a watch. You step out into the crisp morning air, and the cliffs seem quieter still. The puffins haven't returned. Not a single flap, no little honks, no head tilts or mid-air tumbles. But you don't feel disappointed. Just ... reflective ... today. Brother Benedict invites you to the archives, the dry chamber carved into the side of the cliff itself, where the monastery keeps its oldest relics. Time-marked driftwood calendars, scraps of scrolls, puffin feather quills preserved in fish oil wax, and something he calls the final beak. It's a carved stone marker, smooth as polished bone, shaped roughly like a puffin's profile, beak open, gaze lifted skyward. It was made by the first monk who ever used a bird to measure time, Benedict says, his voice barely more than breath. So we think anyway. Historians still argue if it was metaphor or instruction. You trace your fingers across the cool stone. It's simple, elegant, oddly moving. At its base is a notch, a final time mark. The end of a cycle dot, and now it's your turn. With a small bone tool and a bowl of lampblack ink, you're asked to make the season's last entry on the communal driftwood calendar. You carry the piece to the central alcove, the same place where you carved your first beak weeks ago. The monastery gathers behind you. Hoods up quiet, you kneel, breathe dot and draw a single small puffin silhouette, not flying, not flapping, just resting. Facing west dot the last beak mark. You step back and no one speaks. Instead, each monk places something around the calendar. A feather, a bit of string, a broken shell, a pebble shaped vaguely like a puffin, a quiet offering, not to a god, not to a bird, but to the moment. Mainstream fact in medieval Icelandic monastic life, personal relics and symbols were often placed around shared prayer objects, stones etched with names, scraps of writing, and even items found in nature. These were gestures of devotion, memory, and communal marking of time past. You join the final meal of the season. Root mash, a delicate broth flavored with Arctic thyme, and a bit of bread baked into soft spirals meant to mimic the eddies of wind beneath puffin wings. You eat slowly, silently. It feels like a farewell, but not a sad one. Later, the monks gather for a final vigil, not in the chapel, but on the cliffside. Each holds a small candle in a horn cup. You join them in a circle, the sea below black and endless, the sky above just starting to drink up. The stars. No one says what time it is. No one needs to. Quirky tidbit to end your night. There's a line from a forgotten Icelandic devotional scroll, likely copied by hand in a monastery just like this one. It reads, "Bless the wing that tells no hour, but teaches when to pause." You sit in stillness for what feels like a very long time. Finally, Brother Orm leans toward you, whispering, "You've kept time well." You don't know what to say. So you whisper, "Thank you." And it feels like the right thing. Back in your cell, the candle is nearly out. You sit beside the window, watching for movement on the cliff. Nothing comes, but that's okay. You lie back, blanket pulled to your chin, and close your eyes. 4. The first time in weeks. There's no need to listen for a signal. No beat to mark the hour, because you are now part of it. And even in stillness, time keeps drifting gently forward like feathers on salt wind. Now, you can let go. The sounds of this place wind curling through stone corridors, waves brushing against the cliffs, the faint memory of puffin wings slicing through cold morning air. They're still with you. Just softer now, further away, like echoes from a dream you can't quite remember but don't want to forget. Breathe in. Let your shoulders sink. The hours have slowed. The rhythm of the monastery hums in the background. No clocks, no alerts. Just the slow, quiet unfolding of time marked by feathers and fading light. You've walked through days ruled by birds. You've lit candles in silence, listened to stone walls creak, laughed at puffin antics, and carved your own notch in driftwood worn by years of watchful care. You've learned to listen not for bells, but for wings. And now you can rest, because here, on this cliff, time doesn't chase you. It invites you. It wraps around you like a heavy blanket and rocks you gently from one breath to the next. Whatever you carry, you can set it down now, just for tonight. Let your thoughts dissolve like mist into the sea. Let your breathing slow to the rhythm of quiet waves. You are safe. You are right on time. And somewhere, in the great wide dark, a puffin sleeps with one eye closed, one open, watching the stars rise just in case you need a little help finding your way back when morning comes. But for now, just rest. Let everything else go.